The Christmas blizzard had taken my home, ripped the roof clean off like wrapping paper, so I drove to my son Xavier's house, hoping family would shelter me in my darkest hour. But when I knocked on his door, his words cut deeper than any winter wind. You're just going to be a burden, and frankly, we want our privacy. As that door slammed shut, I found myself sleeping in my pickup truck in a frozen Walmart parking lot, wondering if this was how my story would end. But on that third night, when hypothermia was setting in, and I thought I was dying, a guardian angel appeared through the snow, and she would change everything I thought I knew about my own life. I'm thankful you're here to hear what really happened that winter. Comment below with your city. I'd love to know where this story about unexpected angels is reaching you tonight. My name is Zayden Hartwell, and at 65, I thought I'd weathered the worst life could throw at me. I'd been a high school math teacher for 37 years in Minneapolis. 3 years ago, I lost my wife Beatrice, and since then our little house on Oliver Avenue had felt more like a museum than a home. December 24th started like any other day. I made my morning coffee in the same chipped blue mug Beatrice had bought me, sat in my worn leather recliner, and listened to the weather report on AM radio. Folks were looking at a historic blizzard system moving in from the Dakotas. Wind speeds could reach 80 miles per hour with snowfall totals exceeding 2 feet. This is a life-threatening storm. I'd lived through plenty of Minnesota blizzards. In 1978, I'd helped dig out half the neighborhood. In 91, Beatrice and I had lost power for 4 days playing cards by candlelight. We'd always made it through together, but this time I was alone. I spent the afternoon preparing like any sensible Minnesotan would. I checked my flashlights, filled every pot with water, and moved my portable radio down to the basement. The wind was already picking up by 3 o'clock, rattling the storm windows. By evening, the storm had arrived with a vengeance. The wind howled like something alive and angry, shaking the house until the walls groaned in protest. I could hear my neighbor's garbage cans rolling down the street, metal clanging against concrete. Around 9 o'clock, I heard the first crack. It came from upstairs, a sharp splitting sound that made my stomach drop. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed the stairs to investigate. But before I reached the landing, another crack echoed through the house, louder this time, followed by the screaming whistle of wind where wind should never be. The roof was going. I stumbled back down to the basement, clutching the photo of Beatrice and me from our wedding day, listening to 40 years of memories being torn apart above my head. The noise was indescribable. It wasn't just wind, it was the sound of destruction itself, of wood splintering and glass exploding. My kitchen table where Beatrice and I had shared thousands of meals, where I'd graded countless papers. It was all being shredded by forces beyond human control. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the roaring stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise. It was the silence of endings of things that could never be put back together. I sat in that basement for hours, afraid to see what remained. When dawn finally broke, I climbed those basement stairs one last time. Nothing. The entire second floor was gone, scattered across 3 city blocks, like broken toys. My bedroom, where Beatrice had drawn her last breath, vanished. The kitchen where she'd taught me to make her famous apple pie, the living room, where we'd watch the moon landing my little study, where I'd prepared lessons for 37 years, all of it gone. I stood there in my pajamas and winter coat, surrounded by snow and splintered wood, holding that wedding photo and feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. At 65, I was homeless with nothing but the clothes on my back and memories that felt as fragile as the destroyed house. That's when I thought of Xavier, my son, downtown, successful lawyer with a beautiful wife and a life I barely understood. We hadn't spoken much since Beatrice's funeral, but he was family. He was blood. So I drove to my son Xavier's house, hoping family would shelter me in my darkest hour. The gleaming towers of downtown Minneapolis rose before me like monuments to a world I no longer belonged to. My old pickup truck, coated in snow and debris from what used to be my roof, looked pitiful among the luxury cars in the underground garage of Xavier's building. I'd driven through streets still clogged with storm debris, past overturned trees, and scattered pieces of other people's lives, clinging to the belief that blood meant something. That 38 years of fatherhood had to count for something when a man had nowhere else to turn. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt endless. I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. Wild gray hair pajamas visible beneath my winter coat eyes, hollow with exhaustion and loss. I looked like exactly what I was, a homeless old man with nothing left but hope. When I knocked on Xavier's door, I remembered teaching him to tie his shoes on a Saturday morning, just like this one. his small fingers fumbling with the laces while I patiently showed him the bunny ears method. I remembered him helping me rake leaves in our backyard, his 10-year-old arms barely able to handle the big rake, but so eager to help his dad. The door opened, and there stood my son. Tall, successful, wearing an expensive sweater that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. His face registered surprise, then something that looked uncomfortably close to annoyance. "Dad, what are you doing here? It's 10 o'clock at night." "Xavian." My voice cracked slightly. "The storm it took the house. Everything's gone. I was hoping I could stay here for a few days just until I figure things out." I watched his expression change, watched him glance back into the apartment, where soft jazz played and expensive wine glasses caught the light from a crystal chandelier. This was his sanctuary, his perfect life, and I was the chaos from his past, standing in the hallway. "Dad, He hesitated, and for a moment I thought I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee. Then Anastasia appeared behind him, beautiful, polished, wearing the kind of silk blouse that screamed money and taste. She placed her manicured hand on Xavian's shoulder and whispered something in his ear, her eyes never leaving me. I caught the words dinner party and inappropriate timing. Xavian's shoulders straightened. When he looked at me again, his eyes had gone cold distant. He'd made his choice. "Dad, look." He glanced back at his wife, then at his pristine hardwood floors, his white furniture, his carefully curated life. "You're just going to be a burden, and frankly, we want our privacy." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd expected hesitation, maybe some negotiation, but not this casual cruelty. Not from the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose college tuition I'd worked double shifts to pay. "I wouldn't be any trouble," I whispered. "I could sleep on the couch. I could help with—" "It's not going to work." His voice was firm now, businesslike. "You'll figure something out. You always do." The door closed with a soft click that sounded like thunder in the hallway. I stood there for several minutes, staring at the brass numbers on his door, waiting for it to open again, waiting for him to change his mind to remember that I was his father. But the hallway remained silent except for the hum of expensive heating systems and the distant sound of laughter from behind other doors, other families, other lives that didn't include me. The storm outside had stopped, but I was still caught in its aftermath, with nowhere to go and no one left to call family. The Walmart parking lot on East Lake Street became my refuge that first night, though refuge was too generous a word for what amounted to a slow march toward freezing to death. My old Ford pickup had served me faithfully for 15 years. Now it was my bedroom, my dining room, my entire world reduced to a space barely larger than a coffin. I'd parked toward the back, away from the security lights, hoping to blend in with overnight truckers. The temperature had dropped to 20 below, and the wind cut through the metal like tissue paper. I wrapped myself in the emergency blanket from my glove compartment, but it was designed for roadside emergencies, not survival. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, the cold seeped deeper into my bones. I kept thinking about my bedroom on Oliver Avenue, the thick down comforter Beatrice had saved up to buy, the way she'd warm her cold feet against my legs on nights just like this one. Dawn brought no relief, only harsh reality. I shuffled into the Walmart restroom, avoiding eye contact with early shoppers who stared at my rumpled clothes. The fluorescent lights were brutal, showing me exactly what I'd become overnight. One of those invisible people I'd driven past 1,000 times without really seeing. I spent my last $23 on bread, peanut butter, and water. The teenage cashier barely looked at me, but I caught her wrinkling her nose slightly. I probably smelled like defeat. The second night was worse. Snow had begun falling again, and by evening my truck looked like just another mound in the parking lot. The windows fogged over from my breath, then froze, creating a suffocating cocoon. I had to crack a window to breathe, but that let in wind that felt like knives. I found myself talking to Beatrice that night, whispering about how sorry I was that this was how our story was ending. She'd always been the practical one, the planner. If she could see me now, she'd probably shake her head and say, "Zayden Hartwell, what have you gotten yourself into?" By the third night, my body was giving up. The cold had settled so deep into my chest that every breath felt like swallowing ice. My hands shook uncontrollably, and I'd lost feeling in my toes. The bread had frozen solid. I kept drifting in and out of consciousness, and the line between sleeping and dying began to blur. I dreamed of Beatrice calling my name of warm summer afternoons, of Xavian as a little boy climbing into bed between us during thunderstorms. The dreams felt more real than the cold. Sometime after midnight, I stopped shivering. I'd read somewhere that this was a bad sign, that it meant your body was shutting down. But the strange thing was, I felt peaceful for the first time in days. The cold didn't hurt anymore. I closed my eyes and saw a warm light, soft and welcoming, like the reading lamp Beatrice used to keep on her side of the bed. I was ready to walk toward it, ready to let go of the struggle. But on that third night, when hypothermia was setting in and I thought I was dying, a guardian angel appeared through the snow, and she would change everything I thought I knew about my own life. The tapping on my window pulled me back from the edge of whatever comes after life. Through the frost-covered glass, I could make out a figure in a dark winter coat, barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness. When I managed to roll down the window with numb fingers, I saw a woman in her 30s, with concerned blue eyes that seemed to catch what little light there was. She held a thermos and a brown paper bag. Sir, are you all right?" Her voice was gentle but urgent, with impossible warmth in the bitter air. "I've been watching your truck, and I was worried." I tried to speak, but only a raspy croak came out. "Here, drink this slowly." She handed me the thermos cap filled with steaming coffee. My hands shook badly, but the first sip sent warmth, spreading through my chest like liquid salvation. "I'm Dr. Sinclair," she said, watching me carefully. "Ophelia Sinclair. I work at Hennepin County Medical Center. Can you tell me your name?" "Zayden," I managed between sips. "Zayden Hartwell." She pulled out a small penlight. "I need to check your eyes, Mr. Hartwell. You've been out here for days, haven't you?" The examination was gentle but thorough. There was something about her voice, something familiar that tugged at my memory, but my mind felt too foggy to grasp it. "Your core temperature is dangerously low," she said, frowning. "How long have you been living in your truck?" 3 days. Lost my house in the storm. My son. I trailed off, not wanting to explain the shame. "I understand." And somehow I believe she did. She handed me the paper bag. "Turkey and Swiss. I hope that's okay." The sandwich was still warm, the best thing I'd tasted in days. Real food made with care. "Why are you helping me?" I asked between bites. "You don't even know me." She was quiet, studying my face in the dim light. Those blue eyes seemed to be searching for some recognition I couldn't give her. "Let's just say I'm someone who cares," she said finally. "Someone who believes that no one should face the cold alone." She pulled out an envelope from her purse. "There's enough here for a motel room, some hot meals. Please use it. I can't take your money. I don't even know you. You don't need to know me. You just need to accept help when it's offered." There was something in her tone that reminded me of... But the memory slipped away. "I'll come back tomorrow evening," she said, standing and brushing snow off her coat. "Same time. Will you be here?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. She smiled then, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Good. Take care of yourself, Mr. Hartwell. You're going to be okay." As she walked away, disappearing into the swirling snow like she'd never been there at all, I realized I was crying. Not from cold this time, but from something I hadn't felt in days, hope. True to her word, Ophelia returned the next evening, but this time she came prepared for more than emergency rescue. Her car was loaded with supplies, thick blankets, hot soup and medications. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, approaching with gentle authority, "I've been thinking about you all day. How are you feeling?" The truth was, I felt human again. The money she'd left had gotten me a hot shower and my first real meal since the storm. But something about her voice still felt like a melody I'd heard long ago but couldn't place. "Better thanks to you," I said, accepting the steaming soup. "But I still don't understand why you're doing this." She studied my face in the dim light, and I caught something in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or longing. "Would you let me take you to the hospital? Just for a checkup?" Hypothermia can have lasting effects. An hour later, I found myself in the emergency room at Hennepin County Medical Center, watching Ophelia move through the halls like she owned the place. She spoke quietly with nurses, signed forms, and somehow made all the paperwork disappear. "The doctor says you're recovering well," she told me afterward, "but you need to stay warm and keep eating regularly." She drove me to a Caribou Coffee near the hospital, insisting I needed something substantial. The cafe was warm and crowded with people living normal lives, people with homes to return to. "You were a teacher," she said suddenly, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. It wasn't a question. "How did you—" "Yes, high school math. 37 years. I studied her face. "Do we know each other? There's something about your voice." She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "What was it like teaching, I mean?" "Most days were good. When you see that moment when algebra finally clicks, or when a struggling student passes their final exam. I wondered why I was sharing so much with this stranger. Why do you ask? Someone once told me that the best teachers don't just teach subjects, they teach students how to believe in themselves. Her eyes were distant. He said that was the real mathematics of life, showing someone they're worth more than they think they are. My heart started beating faster. Those words, that phrase, I'd said something like that before, hadn't I? But when and to whom? Who told you that? I asked quietly. Someone who changed my life. She looked directly at me, tears gathering in her blue eyes. Someone who taught me what family really means, even when it's not the family you were born into. The coffee cup trembled in my hands. There was something there, some memory trying to surface, like grasping at shadows. A little girl, maybe, long ago. And I became a doctor because someone believed in me when no one else did, she continued. Someone who took in a scared little girl and showed her she was worth saving. Ophelia, I whispered, and her name felt familiar on my tongue. She reached across the table and touched my hand gently. Tomorrow, Mr. Hartwell, I want to show you something important, something that might help you remember. As we sat there in that warm cafe, I felt something stirring in my chest that was more than gratitude, more than hope. It felt like coming home. The next evening, Ophelia drove me through a quiet neighborhood in South Minneapolis, past houses with warm lights glowing in their windows and families visible around dinner tables. Her home was a modest two-story with a wraparound porch, the kind of place that whispered of comfort and belonging. Please come in, she said, her voice carrying a nervousness I hadn't heard before. There's something I need to show you. The living room was exactly what I'd expected from her warm welcoming, filled with medical journals and framed photographs. But it was one particular photo on the mantelpiece that made me stop breathing. There, in a simple silver frame, was a picture I remembered taking with Beatrice's old camera. A much younger version of myself stood behind a small blonde girl, maybe 8 years old, while Beatrice knelt beside her, all three of us grinning at something just outside the frame. The little girl was holding up a math worksheet with a big red A+ at the top. Do you remember this day? Ophelia asked softly, standing beside me. My hands shook as I picked up the frame. The memory came rushing back like a dam bursting that Saturday afternoon when Annie had finally mastered long division. How proud we'd all been. How Beatrice had insisted on taking a picture to celebrate. Annie. I whispered the name, falling from my lips like a prayer. Mr. Hartwell. Her voice was trembling now, thick with emotion. It's me, Annie. You used to call me your little Annie. I turned to look at her. Really? Look at her, and suddenly I could see it. The same bright blue eyes, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. The gentle smile that had once lit up our kitchen every morning at breakfast. My God, I breathed. Little Annie, but how? You were just 5 when I came to you, she said, tears streaming down her face now. 13 when they took me back to my birth family. You and Miss Beatrice, you saved my life. The memories flooded back in waves. Annie at 5, so small and scared, hiding behind my legs when strangers came to the door. Annie at 7, standing on a step stool beside Beatrice in the kitchen, learning to make chocolate chip cookies. Annie at 10, sitting at our dining room table, while I helped her with homework, her tongue poking out slightly when she concentrated. You taught me that family isn't just blood, she continued, her voice breaking. You showed me what love looks like, what it means to be wanted. When my birth family found me again, I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay with you and Miss Beatrice forever. We wanted you to stay too, I said, my own tears falling freely now. But the courts, they said blood family was best. We had no choice. They took me to Canada, she said. New life, new opportunities, they said. And it was good, they were good people. They put me through school, supported my dream of becoming a doctor. But I never forgot you. I never forgot the man who taught me that I was worth something. I reached out with shaking hands and cupped her face, seeing my little Annie in this accomplished woman before me. I looked for you, I whispered. After you left, I tried to find out where you'd gone, but the records were sealed. I never stopped wondering what happened to my little girl. I graduated medical school 2 years ago, she said, leaning into my touch. Came back to Minneapolis to work. It took me a year to find you, and when I did... She paused, wiping her eyes. When I learned that Miss Beatrice had passed, that you were living alone, I knew I had to find a way back into your life. You've been watching over me, I said, understanding flooding through me. She nodded. For a year now. I've been waiting for the right moment, the right way to tell you. And then the storm happened, and I saw you in that parking lot, and I couldn't wait anymore. I pulled her into my arms, then this woman who had once been my little girl, and we both sobbed for the years we'd lost for Beatrice, who wasn't there to see this moment, for the family we'd been and were becoming again. "I've been watching over you for a year, waiting for the right moment," she whispered against my shoulder. "Welcome home, Dad." The guest bedroom Annie prepared for me was everything Xavier's apartment was not warm, welcoming, filled with genuine care. She'd laid out fresh towels, placed water on the nightstand, and found pajamas that would fit me. "This was going to be my office," she said, smoothing the quilt, "but I think this is much better." I sat on the mattress, still overwhelmed. Less than a week ago, I'd had a home, a routine, a life I understood. Now I was staying with the little girl I'd raised who'd become a doctor, and spent a year searching for ways to help me. "Annie, I can't stay long. I need to find my own place." She sat beside me, and I saw the determined 8-year-old who used to insist on doing her own homework. "Actually, I've been thinking about that," she said. "Your house on Oliver Avenue, the lot, is still yours, right? Insurance should cover rebuilding." I nodded. "Eventually. But the paperwork contractor's finding temporary housing. I'm 65, Annie. I don't know if I have the energy to start over." "What if you didn't have to do it alone?" She returned with a folder of papers. "I've been researching contractors, architects' design ideas. What if we rebuilt together? Not just rebuilt, made it better. Bigger kitchen, better insulation, maybe that workshop you always wanted." "Annie, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering." Her voice was firm but gentle. "You gave me 8 years of unconditional love when I had nowhere else to go. Let me give some of that back." The contrast hit me hard. 3 days ago, my biological son had called me a burden and shut his door without a second thought. Now this woman, connected to me by choice rather than blood, was offering to rebuild my entire life. "The house would still be yours," she continued. "Your name on the deed, your decisions. I just want to help make it happen. Think of it as paying forward what you did for me." I looked at her, so confident and capable, hardly recognizing the scared little girl who used to have nightmares about being sent away. "You don't owe me anything," I said quietly. "We loved you because you were ours, not because we expected something in return." "I know," she said, eyes bright with tears. "That's exactly why I want to do this. You showed me what unconditional love looks like, Dad. Let me show you the same thing." "Dad." The word hit me square in the chest, more powerful than any legal document could ever be. "There's something else," she said, expression growing serious. "Your son Xavier, what he did, that's not okay. That's not what family does." I felt my shoulders slump. "He's made his choice. He has his own life now. Has he?" Annie's voice carried steel I'd never heard before. "Or does he just need to be reminded of what he's throwing away? Sometimes people need to understand consequences before they can change." She walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. "You raised him to be better than that. Maybe it's time someone reminded him of the man his father really is." "Annie, I don't want trouble." "It won't be trouble," she said, turning back with a smile, both loving and determined. "It'll be education. There's one more thing I need to do with your son." 2 days later, Xavier and Anastasia walked into the ocean air, looking like the successful people they were accustomed to being the most important ones in any room. They'd agreed to meet with Dr. Sinclair after she'd called about his father's condition. Annie sat at a corner table, wearing her professional demeanor like armor, watching them approach. "Dr. Sinclair," Xavier approached with his lawyer's smile. "You said this was about my father. Please sit down." Annie's voice was calm, controlled. "Yes, this is about Xaden Hartwell." Anastasia settled into her chair with obvious impatience. "Is he all right? We haven't heard from him since—" She paused, not wanting to admit they'd thrown him out. "Since you refused him shelter during the worst storm in Minneapolis history." Annie's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel beneath it. "Since you told him he'd be nothing but trouble," Xavier's smile faltered. "Now wait a minute. Let me introduce myself properly," Annie interrupted. "I'm Dr. Ophelia Sinclair, but your father knew me as Annie. I was his foster daughter for 8 years. The silence was deafening. Xavier stared at her, recognition slowly dawning. "Annie," he whispered. "Little Annie with the blonde pigtails you used to help Mom make pancakes on Sunday mornings. You had that stuffed rabbit." "You do remember," Annie said, a flicker of something softer crossing her face before the steel returned. "Yes, I was your little sister for 8 years. You were there, Xavier. You saw how they treated me." Xavier's eyes filled with tears. My God, Annie, you became a doctor. Dad always said you were smart enough to do anything. Your father took me in when I was 5 years old. Annie continued steadily. Scared, traumatized, unwanted by everyone else. He and Miss Beatrice gave me 8 years of unconditional love. She leaned forward. Do you know what your father did to support me? He took on extra tutoring, worked weekends, turned down promotions because it would have meant longer hours away from family. All of his family. He never complained, Annie continued. Never once called me a problem. When I had nightmares, he'd sit by my bed. When I struggled with math, he'd spend hours helping me. He told me that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when you need them most. I remember, Xavier said quietly, his voice breaking. I remember how patient he was with you. How proud he was when you got good grades. That's right. And your father never once suggested that caring for me was inconvenient. He never called me what you called him. The implication hung in the air. Even when money was tight, he chose love over convenience. Every single day. Your father lost everything in that storm, Annie said. Everything. And he came to you, his son, who lived in the same house with us for 8 years, hoping for basic human decency. And you sent him away because you wanted your privacy. Xavier buried his face in his hands. God, what have I done, Annie? I'm so sorry. You forgot who raised you, Annie said quietly. You forgot that when someone you love is drowning, you don't ask if it's convenient to throw them a rope. Finally, Xavier looked up, his eyes red with shame. How do I fix this? He whispered. How do I even begin to apologize for what I've done? 1 year later, the smell of roast turkey filled every corner of the house on Oliver Avenue. The new home that rose from the ashes was everything Annie had promised. Bigger, brighter, warmer. 2 stories of hope built on unconditional love. I stood in the kitchen watching Annie pull homemade rolls from the oven with the same careful attention Beatrice used to give her Christmas cooking. The past 12 months had been a journey from sleeping in a frozen truck to standing in a home more beautiful than I'd ever dreamed. Dad, the table looks perfect, Annie said, wiping flour from her hands. Each time she called me Dad, it filled a space in my heart I hadn't realized was empty. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. I opened the door to find Xavier and Anastasia and 8-year-old Marcus on the porch. My grandson looked up with a shy smile. We'd only seen each other a handful of times over the years. Brief visits that Xavier had kept frustratingly short. Hi, Grandpa, Marcus said quietly. Dad said you have a new house now. That's right, buddy, I said, kneeling to his level. Would you like to see it? Anastasia stepped forward, her usual polished confidence replaced by something more genuine. Mr. Hartwell, thank you for having us. The house is beautiful. The past year had been a slow dance of rebuilding trust. After Annie's confrontation, both Xavier and Anastasia had tried to make amends through phone calls. Visits, small gestures. But trust once broken doesn't heal overnight. Dinner was careful at first, polite conversation, shared memories. Annie bridging past hurts and future possibilities. But gradually watching Marcus's excitement over the wooden train set seeing Anastasia actually engage. Instead of checking her phone, the tension eased. Grandpa, Marcus said over dessert, Dad told me about the storm that broke your old house. Were you scared? Very scared, I admitted. But sometimes when something gets destroyed, you get the chance to build something even better. Xavier's eyes met mine, understanding the deeper meaning. After dinner, while Marcus played and Annie showed Anastasia her medical journals, Xavier approached me by the fireplace. He said quietly, I know saying sorry isn't enough. I looked at my son. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something humbler. You're right. Sorry isn't enough. But it's a start. I want Marcus to know his grandfather. Really know you, and I want to be the son you raised me to be. I nodded slowly. I forgive you, Xavier, but trust. That has to be earned back through actions, not words. Can you understand that? Yes, he said firmly, however long it takes. Later, as they prepared to leave, I watched Xavier help Marcus with his coat, while Anastasia thanked Annie for the recipes she'd shared. Small changes, but real ones. Can we come back next week? Grandpa, Marcus asked, hugging my legs. Annie said she'd teach me to make cookies. I'd like that very much, I said, ruffling his hair. As their car pulled away, Annie and I stood in the doorway of our warm home. They're trying, she said softly. Yes, they are. Looking back now, I realize the blizzard didn't just destroy my house. It cleared the ground for something better. It showed me that family isn't defined by blood, but by who chooses to love you when you have nothing left. At 66, I learned you're never too old to rebuild, never too broken for love to find you again. Sometimes the family you need isn't the one you were born with, it's the one that chooses you. So if you take anything from my story, remember this. When life's storms tear down everything you thought was permanent, look for the people who show up in the aftermath. They're your real family. No matter where you're listening tonight, Minneapolis, Minnesota, or anywhere else, remember that love always finds a way home. Looking back on this journey, I see how God works in mysterious ways. That Christmas blizzard wasn't just destruction, it was divine intervention, stripping away everything I thought mattered to reveal what truly does. Don't be like I was thinking blood makes family. Don't close your heart when someone needs shelter. Don't let pride blind you to the angels God places in your path. I almost missed the greatest blessing of my later years because I was focused on the wrong son. These grandpa stories we tell aren't just entertainment, they're lessons wrapped in love. This true story taught me that sometimes we have to lose everything to find what we never knew we were missing. Annie didn't just save my life that night in the parking lot. She saved my understanding of what family really means. God has a way of bringing the right people back into our lives at exactly the right moment. He used a storm to tear down my house, but he used love to rebuild my heart. The true story isn't about the blizzard or the rejection, it's about redemption, about second chances, about discovering that the most precious grandpa stories come from the children who choose us, not just the ones who share our DNA. When God closes one door, he opens another. Sometimes that door leads to a Walmart parking lot where miracles happen. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own family miracle, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that remind us love always finds a way home.